One final time, your soulmate read your message. What transpired next altered everything. Don't skip this, my darling kid. What you are going to hear is not your typical tale. It starts with a single message that was never really forgotten. Your soulmate came back to that same message one final time, long after the conversation had stopped and everyone thought it was over. Above the screen, their finger hesitated. Their pulse could not remain steady. They made a self-promise to never read it again. But they continued to be pulled back by something more powerful. It wasn't inquisitiveness. It wasn't just regret. It was the sense that a reality they had been avoiding was concealed in those straightforward words. Every memory came flooding back when they opened it again, whispering, "Maybe I missed something." They attempted to erase every laugh. It didn't matter how quiet they claimed to be. Every feeling they had suppressed resurfaced. The walls surrounding their hearts started to fall apart in that one instant. They saw a line that they had read numerous times but, for some reason, had never really comprehended until now. All of a sudden, the meaning of those words was completely different. They had one last opportunity to observe what had always been in front of them, as if time itself had stopped. Remain until the very end. Because what they found in that message marked the start of something that neither of you could have predicted. There is something enormous in store for you. Around them, the quiet grew louder than any sound. After setting the phone down, they picked it up again without delay. They read each line again, looking for hints they had previously overlooked. Then an unforeseen event occurred. Questions they had never dared to ask began to be answered by their own recollections. They recalled moments that had seemed insignificant. A courteous gesture, an incomplete farewell, a delayed response, or a conversation cut off before the truth could be said. Everything fit together like a puzzle, unveiling its secret picture piece by piece. The realization that the message had never called for perfection caused their eyes to well up with emotion. It had been requesting courage, patience, and honesty. The realization was more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. For a long time, they had thought that distance meant the story was finished. However, they now realized that distance had only served to prepare them to appreciate the significance of what they had nearly lost. Don't skip it, since their next choice was taken in a matter of seconds and had repercussions that would drastically alter both of their hearts' paths. All of a sudden, the seemingly unattainable future felt tangible. However, a silent barrier remained between reality and hope. They made a decision they never would have made because of an emotion they could no longer ignore. For what they thought would be the last time, they glanced at your name on the screen. They reached for the keyboard, then halted. It was too late, fear said. It was the perfect moment, hope muttered. Until they noticed something unbelievable, neither voice was powerful enough to prevail. One small information that they had missed the last time they opened your communication was concealed beneath it. Everything they thought about you, about themselves, and about what lay ahead was altered by that overlooked information. When they discovered the story had never finished where they had assumed, their breathing became erratic. It had only been put on hold, waiting to resume at this precise moment. They closed their eyes, inhaled deeply, and reached for the screen once more. However, before their fingers could move, something wholly unexpected materialized, causing them to freeze in shock. Stay to the very end because the next moment will show you why reading your note one last time turned into a pivotal moment that neither of you will ever forget. There is something enormous in store for you. And the truth is just now starting to come to light. The room was infused with an odd serenity. However, everything was suddenly altering inside your lover. They couldn't get the unexpected detail out of their heads. Anyone else would have overlooked it since it was so tiny. However, it seemed to them like the final chapter in a tale that had never really come to a conclusion. They repeatedly gazed at the television, perplexed as to how they had missed it for so long. All the doubts they had previously had started to crumble. Suddenly, the version of you they had imagined vanished, to be replaced by an entirely new reality. They came to understand that being silent did not imply a lack of concern. Silence had occasionally just been two hearts waiting for the ideal opportunity to communicate. The next event was even more unexpected, so don't skip it. They grabbed the keyboard, typed something, erased it, then typed something else and erased it as well. Their heart wanted to speak right away, but fear kept asking, what if this chance disappears forever? Stay till the end. This hesitancy was going to produce the story's most significant emotional turning point. One's realization grew stronger the more they thought about you. In some way, every path they had taken in an attempt to move on had brought them back to the same memory. Eventually, every diversion had reminded them of your name. At last, they acknowledged something they had been keeping hidden, even from themselves. They never really let go. Long after all other conversations had vanished, that one message had silently lingered inside their hearts. They discovered moments that suddenly had entirely different meanings as they went higher, reading older lines they had nearly forgotten. Words that were commonplace at first seemed strong. Once ignored smiles became unforgettable all of a sudden. They realized something that altered everything, and their hearts quickened. When in fact fate had been waiting patiently for the appropriate moment, they had confused time for destiny. Don't skip because they were about to hit a button when another surprising finding showed up on the screen, causing them to pause once more. The significance of this new revelation was too great to ignore, even though it wasn't loud or spectacular. It provided an answer to a question that your soulmate had been carrying for more time than anyone realized. Uncertainty gave way to emotion as their gaze stayed glued on the screen. They began to consider what may still be feasible instead of what had gone wrong for the first time in a long time. Where disappointment had lingered for so long, hope quietly reappeared. Knowing that the next choice could permanently alter everything, they slowly raised their hand. The phone abruptly reacted in a way they never anticipated, exposing something that made their heart race even more as their finger got closer. They muttered, "This can't be happening." In that moment that will never be forgotten, they realized the story was far from finished. The next moment will show why this unexpected sign persuaded them that leaving was no longer an option, so stay until the very end. There is something enormous in store for you. Your soulmate's entire being froze when their phone responded. They couldn't believe what they were seeing as they gazed at the screen. It wasn't just another alert. It served as a reminder that the bond they had worked so hard to hide had never really vanished. Every second that went by made their heartbeat louder, and all of their justifications for leaving abruptly became ineffective. They recalled the day they persuaded themselves that life would be easier if they closed the door. However, when they stood there, they saw that the reverse had actually occurred. There had never been tranquility in the distance. The quiet had only gotten thicker as a result. The next few moments became incomprehensible, so don't skip. In an attempt to pinpoint the precise moment when everything changed, their minds replayed every exchange, every grin, and every incomplete sentence. Then they had an unanticipated thought. What if the conclusion I came to was not the true one? That one question would not go away. When they saw your name once more, they experienced something they had nearly forgotten rather than terror. I hope. A subdued yet potent optimism that maybe this tale has been waiting for a last opportunity all along. Your soulmate was just starting to comprehend why they had been drawn back to your message after all this time, so stay to the very end because something significant is waiting for you. As they continued to read each word with fresh eyes, the room around them faded into the background. Sentences that appeared unremarkable at first have a deeper significance. Where they had previously seen distance, they saw kindness. Where they had previously expected rejection, they saw patience. They were stunned by how effortlessly the facts came to light. Every miscommunication that had caused a rift between two people now seemed to be smaller than it had ever been. Confusion gave way to understanding, and their breathing slowed. That one change was all it took for them to stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and start asking, "What if this was preparing us for something greater?" Their shoulders began to release the burden they had been carrying for so long. They came to the realization that they had never really looked with an open heart, even though they had spent innumerable nights thinking they had lost something valuable. As they gripped the phone more tightly, they realized that some connections were meant to last forever and would not go away. Avoid skipping. Because just when they thought they had finally discovered the complete truth, they suddenly noticed another little detail. They leaned forward and read it repeatedly, trying to persuade themselves they weren't dreaming because it was so unexpected. The tension grew with each passing second. There was a whisper in every heartbeat that something spectacular was going to happen. There is something enormous in store for you. Your soulmate's next decision will be the pivotal moment they will never forget. Your soulmate took a slow breath without looking away from the screen, as if they were mustering all of their remaining bravery. They did not pull away this time, even though their fingers trembled a little above the keyboard. They secretly believed that they would live their entire lives wondering what may have occurred if they had left again. That thought was more powerful than pride, more powerful than fear, and more powerful than all the excuses they had previously offered for remaining silent. They realized that the message they had opened the previous time had not changed since the words were different as they were getting ready to finally let their heart speak. This knowledge was overwhelming. They were different, therefore it had changed. At last, their heart was able to acknowledge the reality that it had previously been too terrified to acknowledge. Their eyes were filled with silent tears of relief rather than despair. All along, the answers they had been looking for outside had been waiting within this one conversation. They closed their eyes, spoke your name again, and made a choice that would influence everything that came after. However, just as they were about to hit submit, something entirely unexpected, something neither of you could have predicted, appeared on the screen. Their hand went cold. Their heart was beating more quickly than before. As they stared in utter shock, Time seemed to stop as they realized that what had just happened would either permanently alter the course of this story or bring two hearts closer than ever. Avoid skipping. Continue until the very end. There is something enormous in store for you. Furthermore, the most significant discovery has not yet been made. In that memorable moment, everything came to a halt. Your sweetheart was gasping for air as they peered at the screen, trying to figure out if what had just appeared was genuine or just an emotional trick. They blinked once, then twice, but nothing happened. As if fate itself had determined that this was the precise moment when the truth could no longer be concealed, the unexpected sign persisted, silently waiting. They all felt a surge of emotions at once. They couldn't tell which emotion was stronger as regret, hope, excitement, and terror mingled inside their hearts. Unable to look away, they sat down gently. All of the memories came back with amazing clarity. Unknowingly, it was the first talk that made them grin. The words that lingered in their thoughts long after the conversation was over. The quiet that weighed more than any disagreement could. All of a sudden, they realized that the message they kept reopening had nothing to do with the past. It had always hinted at a future they were too terrified to embrace. The story they had been telling themselves for so long was entirely destroyed by what transpired next. So don't skip. What if I was wrong about everything? They muttered to themselves. The question kept coming back to them until they could no longer ignore it. Stay until the very end because there's something enormous in store for you, and the following revelation will make every moment seem like it was heading to this precise moment. Your soulmate gradually revealed feelings that had been suppressed for months. They ceased placing the blame on external factors. They stopped reliving past setbacks. Rather, even though neither of you were aware of it, they began to see the unseen moments that had subtly linked your life. Suddenly, every coincidence had significance. Now, every delay felt more like preparation than rejection. They discovered that their hearts had been secretly recalling every detail while they had been making an effort to forget. Everything became more apparent the more they thought about it. At last, they acknowledged that reading your message one last time had not brought back painful memories. They believed that hope had vanished forever, but it had come back. Their heartbeat stabilized, and they smiled naturally for the first time in a long time. However, just as assurance took the place of doubt, something even more surprising occurred. Once more, their phone lit up. They couldn't readily describe it, and it wasn't what they had anticipated seeing. Their eyes grew wide with shock as soon as they realized what it meant. This was no typical coincidence, so don't skip. It was as if the answer they had been waiting for had finally shown up just when they needed it. There is something enormous in store for you. Your soulmate was aware that there was no going back at this point. They recognized they were at a crossroads unlike anything they had ever encountered, and they gripped the phone tightly. The safe route of silence, unanswered queries, and acting as though nothing had changed was one that was well known. The other route took bravery, integrity, and a readiness to believe what their heart had been telling them all along. They remained silent for a long while. Everything inside them was louder than ever, but the room stayed silent. They inhaled deeply, glanced at your name once more, and realized that their story had been sufficiently dominated by fear. They resisted letting fear dictate the conclusion this time. At last, their finger moved confidently in the direction of the screen. One last unanticipated detail emerged just before they finished the action, revealing a truth so potent that it brought tears to their eyes. They realized immediately that this was not the conclusion they had anticipated. It was the start of an entirely new chapter. Avoid skipping. Continue until the very end. The decision your soulmate ultimately makes and the reasons it permanently alters everything will be revealed in the next moment, so something enormous is waiting for you. At last, the choice was made. Your partner was no longer uncertainly staring at the screen. They gazed at it with a silent resolve they had never experienced before. All of the unsolved questions that had plagued them for so long appeared to vanish. They realized that some moments only come around once, and if they let this one pass, they might wonder what might have been for years. Their hands ceased to shake. Their breathing calmed. They weren't attempting to alter the past or forecast the future for the first time. They just decided to be honest. They grinned as they took another look at your last post and realized that significance had always come from more than just the words. It was the bravery they had at last discovered within themselves. The next few seconds formed the story's emotional turning point, so don't skip it. As they were about to take action, a long-forgotten memory came back to them with startling clarity. A long-ago pledge that is nearly imperceptible due to the passage of time. That recollection turned reluctance into assurance. Stay until the very end because something enormous is in store for you, and what transpired next was unimaginable. They took the action they had been putting off for far too long without giving it any more thought. They were no longer afraid of the seemingly never-ending silence. Rather, it served as a reminder of how valuable real connection can be when both hearts are prepared to face reality. Every justification vanished. The power of all imagined endings vanished. At last, they acknowledged that dread had already written too many pages and had no place in the next chapter. The world appeared oddly serene as they gazed out the window, as though everything had slowed down to observe this one decision. They came to understand that significant change doesn't always come with dramatic signs or loud moments. Sometimes it starts with a single, sincere choice made in total quiet. Avoid skipping. Because the phone suddenly lit up again just when they thought they had done everything they could. It wasn't just another typical moment this time. It was enough to leave them staring at the screen in utter shock, wondering if this moment had been subtly planned from the start by fate. Their heart was racing, but it was no longer motivated by dread as it had been. It was optimism. Knowing that whatever followed next would become an unforgettable memory, they gazed slowly at the shimmering screen. Time appeared to stop for a split second. Every setback, every unresolved issue, and every restless night suddenly seemed like tiny fragments of a much bigger picture that was at last coming together. Perhaps the biggest changes don't occur the first time we communicate, they muttered to themselves. When we fully comprehend, they take place. They reached for the screen with newfound bravery, prepared to welcome whatever lay beyond that one instant. However, the scene ended with one last mystery that hinted at an even bigger surprise to come before everything could be revealed. Avoid skipping. Continue until the very end. The following chapter will reveal the one fact your soulmate never anticipated learning, so something enormous is in store for you. Additionally, it will alter the significance of everything that came before.